Oh, hey Danny, how are you today?
I'm really good, thank you, Charlie. How are you doing?
Oh, absolutely. I'm great, thank you. It's last Friday of the week, so how can you not be happy?
Yeah,
Now,
exactly. Although I am looking forward to a lie-in tomorrow. It's been a busy couple of weeks.
well, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna be seeing why you're actually on cloud nine at the moment. But first, before we delve in, how do you like your coffee in the morning?
Good question. It kind of depends. So usually I'm a latte kind of guy, usually with a vanilla shot, but real sugar. I can't be doing with that fake stuff. It tastes chemically to me. Um, but actually, because I'm not particularly extroverted, if I drink too much coffee, I can see the Wi-Fi. I find myself getting jittery. So actually, not too strong, lots of milk, and if I happen to be drinking more drinks that day, then I will move over to something slightly less caffeinated, like a tea.
Now, I loved what you just said there. You're just like, because you're not so extroverted, you obviously there's a limit to how much you're drinking. I kind of alludes to what we're talking today. So, why two-part question? What do you mean by that? How does your extroversion and introversion affect your levels of caffeine? Uh, for example, I will drink caffeine to the high hill, and I have to force myself to stop because I am a typical extrovert. And then, secondly, what is it that you do, and why, and how do those both link together?
Okay, so I'll answer the second question first. I'm a psychologist. I'm an organizational psychologist, which basically means I work to help nurture the behaviors that people need in their organizations. And where extroversion and introversion comes in as a dimension of personality is broadly it's where do we get our energy. Extroverts tend to get their energy externally, so that might mean that they're more social and gregarious and have literal external stimuli. So they might have music playing whilst they work and caffeine and so on. Introverts are more reflective, more measured, more observant. They tend to be self-powered, and all of us have the ability to be both. Extroverts have the ability to listen, it just takes more effort. Introverts have the ability to be the centre of attention, it just takes more effort. And it's understanding, a lot of my work is about helping people understand when are they at their best, so that we don't have introverts having to have all this external stimuli and going home shattered every night. Or extrovert coaches having to shut up and listen and going home shattered every night.
And first and foremost, can I say congratulations? You have been nominated as the finalist for the leader of I'm going to butcher this, Leadership Advocate of the Year with the Institute of Leadership. Is that correct?
It is, and it's something of a bit of a shock. I've been in leadership for a very long time, but it's always been in the corporate world, never as a small business owner. And having been in business on my own for only sort of 3.5 years, to be nominated in the first place, to be a finalist and see some of the names that I absolutely recognise in there as, should I even be on that should I even be at the dinner table, let alone on the stage? So yeah, I'm a little bit nervous, a little bit excited, and chuffed a bit. I haven't told my mum yet because I just don't have the energy to hear her hooping and wallowing, and yeah.
Well, don't worry, this podcast will go out after you have told
She
your
can't
mum
work
to...
a computer. She'll be sorry, Mum, if you do see this.
So for people listening, we are going to get into your research as well, because that was a big part of unveiling that with the Institute. But for people listening, that we're going to go into that at the end and get more into it, and we'll weave and bob it in between our narrative. But the first question we want to start with for you is, how do you run an organization without a leader? Now, what is that dare I say the anti-leadership? But that's not actually what we're saying here today, is it? How do you run an organization without a leader?
So probably the best place to start is understanding what we mean when we say leader. And throughout history, a leader has always been a person. The argument has then been, what type of person, what traits and skills do they have, or what situation are they in, or how do they build relationships, or are they authentic, or are they manipulative and charismatic? But it's always been a person. that person has then decided, where are we going? So what kind of vision and direction are we heading? And they've also influenced the norms of how do we do it? So what's the culture and the behaviors? But it's always been a person. So it offers the question, if people in the team or the group knew the direction, knew where we were heading, and they also understood those kind of rule of engagement and, how can I contribute and what am I allowed to do, then does the leader need to be a physical person? Or can the environment, the culture, be a person? So that's the first part, is how do companies or organizations run without a leader? Technically they don't, but that leader doesn't necessarily need to be shaped like a person.
So let's rewind for a few people who've maybe not listened to some of the other podcasts. I've had some other psychologists, some of the specialists in leadership, and when I started this podcast, there was no intention to be talking about leadership so much. The premise of this podcast is to help businesses grow from the people who are growing their own businesses and their specialist skills. But I find it so interesting that so much about business growth is about the people, and I like it. I'm pleased we've got lots of episodes and lots of knowledge on this. But for the people who maybe have not listened to some of those episodes, can we just go into a bit of like the definition, not the definition, apologies, the history of leadership and how that has evolved over the last 100 years, to the point where, and the reason why I ask is I love your thought process and your approach, because it almost feels like this is the next wave of how we're going to think about leadership when our environments as a workplace are so different than what they were like in the 80s, as a prime example.
Absolutely. And I feel quite old that someone young will be saying like the 80s is like some golden era from years and years ago, and I'm like, that feels like yesterday to me.
I picked the 80s because it's an interesting era for technology, where there was some technology, but nothing on the absolute scale of what it is now. And there's probably, if we go back to like the 60s or 40s, there would be the other benchmarks that we go against, because that's like our grandparents.
The technology of the 60s was maybe moving from wool suits to polycotton. That was the technological changes, whereas the pace of change today does feel far more frenetic. So a kind of history of leadership, obviously we've always had leaders, but as a study area academically, we've never really researched leadership until the 1800s. In fact, the word didn't appear in the dictionary until 1821, which is a little bit crazy if you think about it.
Yeah.
And we didn't start looking at what leaders are, what their traits are, what makes a leader really until sort of the late 1850s, 1860s. And the original theories were, you can't learn to be a leader, you're just born a leader. And this great man theory, that it was always men, it was never women. It was always a certain race of men as well. So clearly, academically, this was a flawed belief at the start. So that then moved us into a kind of second phase of learning and ideas of, can actually you learn these skills? So in the sort of 1880s, those trait models were started to be developed. And when I started in leadership in sort of the 90s, a lot of those models were still in use. You could still be sent on courses to improve your conflict management or your communication styles. And if I could just have the right blend of traits and skills, then I'd be a great leader. But therein is the challenge. What's the right blend of traits and skills? The famous example is Winston Churchill had the right blend of skills that made him a great leader in wartime, but not in peacetime. So the third generation then became, do we have to consider the situation, whether it's wartime or peacetime, etc.? So situational leadership and contextual leadership models started to spring up. Up to that point, nobody had even thought of followers. It was all about the leader and their skills and their trait and their situation. So the next generation was then, what about the relationship with followers? Do we need to work in a way where we identify maybe their values and try and make the business values their values, so the direction is aligned. But that feels a little bit manipulative. So that then brought in another wave of research around how do we be more authentic in that approach, so it's not actually a one-sided, agenderized kind of way of leading. And then the last kind of generation of leadership, after we've considered great men, their skills, the situation they're in, the context that they're in, the relationship with the followers, was, can we share leadership between multiple people? And we see a little bit of this in the UK in the education system, where you can have the core decisions and the governance of schools is done at a local authority or an academy level. But then the teams within, the schools within that group have some autonomy over how do they utilise their budgets, what's their curriculum, etc. There is an argument that maybe that's not leadership, it's just a fancy form of delegation. But in the purest sense, if they have full autonomy, then perhaps they are leaders. And that kind of brings us up to date. But in all of those models, as varied as they are, and there's hundreds of them, a leader is always a person. It's always somebody sat at a desk saying, follow me, we're going this way. I've got the skills, or I know the terrain, or I really care about my followers, or I've got some friends that can help me. But it's always a person.
I think everybody resonate that when they hear all the, again, there'll be lots of podcasts and articles and videos, all of this educational material. I love that you said about the different traits and what is that perfect blend of like communication style or ways of thinking or vision leading, or for that team. So what is the perfect environment? I know that's a loaded question.
Well, I'm a psychologist, so the first thing that psychologists say to any question is, it depends. And this kind of model of, if I could just have enough tools on my van that I could pull out the ones I need at any point, then I'll be a great leader, carpenter, whatever. And that's not quite true, because leadership is often into uncharted territory. So we can't necessarily use the tools that we've got. Sometimes we need to develop other tools and we don't even know what those are. So leadership is a fluid, dynamic, ad hoc kind of approach that doesn't fit into a box. And that's possibly why in the academic world, we don't have a definition for leadership. Nobody can agree on what leadership is, but we all know when we don't have it.
That's almost terrifying for certain personalities as well, if you think about it, where there isn't a roadmap that they can follow. There isn't a process that, like, this is the absolute right way. Almost the process is, here's the starting place, here's kind of the direction you need to go, and you've got to figure some bits. Let's call it I'm a marketeer, so I'm going to call it optimization along that road path. I'm going to use my own words on how I envision things to create it. So when I'm always a big fan. So if I'm going to play a little bit of role play here. I'm the business owner. I am a business owner, and I have got a team of 50.
Mm-hmm.
Now, automatically, that business owner is quite busy. There's a lot to be thinking about and across the different departments. When you're creating this environment, what is a behaviour from any team that appears to be good but is actually a distraction from the business growth and the business goal?
Great question. And actually one that many of my clients and audiences when I speak have exactly the same issue. It depends. The thing that is most common is, why do we exist? Where are we heading? What's that kind of North Star? If we don't have that, then how do you know what behaviours are good or bad? Often what we do is we're not quite sure of that kind of vision and that endpoint and where we're heading. So what we do in the absence of that is we look for behaviours that we like. So things that either, if we're high conscientiousness, well, then we might like more structure and organisation. So actually I'm going to recruit and attract and reward and recognise people that demonstrate that behaviour. We might throw what we call artifacts at it. So let's have pizza Fridays and dogs in the office and all stuff that we think this is going to create a great place to work. Missing the point that our role as leaders is not to create a great place of work. It is to create a place where great work is done. And there's a subtle nuance between them. Hopefully the latter is also fun and energetic if that helps. But what does good look like and how do you align is the first place to start. Because then it makes it much clearer what are the behaviours that are going to help us. If you've got an environment if your goal requires innovative behaviours, well, then you need to make sure that the processes, the protocols, and the people in your organisation are comfortable with breaking things and making mistakes and learning from it, and being comfortable and psychologically safe enough to put their hand up and go, I made a mistake, isn't that amazing? Do your reward mechanics encourage failure? Yeah. Whereas in another organisation, if you're in the army, then maybe that's not the right environment for you. Maybe you do need more kind of siloed, high specialization, low opacity. I don't need to know what they're doing over there. I'm going to do my job really, really well because I trust that they're going to do what they do over there. And those behaviors help achieve your goal. But a lot of business owners, particularly small business owners, particularly business owners that are quite new, so if they're in the first couple of years of business, they're so focused on, I started this business and it's my baby, that they have an emotional connection to it, and they haven't necessarily thought strategically around what are the behaviours that are going to get us ready for the future, or going to help me, retire on the golf course or spend time with my kids or whatever it is you want to do. What's going to help everybody else around you do that? What is that North Star?
I love that you said, you beat me to it on the quote. I really wanted to make sure that we got that in there today, because I thought that statement is so powerful. So I'm going to just repeat so people really soak it in. So culture isn't about making a great place to work. It's about making a place where great work is done. I think that is
absolutely
incredibly.
Hopefully it's also a great place. Place. But small businesses, your resources are finite. If your resources have been spent on creating a commune where everybody gets along and it's lovely and we're a family, fantastic. You can still go out of business. Mm-hmm. If you instead spend those resources, that time, that investment, that direction into what is going to help us thrive, then not only will your business is more likely to be a success, but you'll also attract people that want to come on that journey. Mm-hmm. We didn't get into business to set up communes. As nice as it is to have a commune and everybody get along, it's so banal. It's so predictable and nice.
So let's delve into that. Because that has been, I'd say, the trend in the last 10 years for, I'm going to highlight the millennials as well here. The millennial businesses that have been created over the last 10 years, where there has been this emphasis on slides in the offices, ball pits in the offices, bars, dogs. What else is there? I've had sandwiches Fridays, coffee Fridays, you name it. There's just some of the lists
Taco Tuesdays.
Yeah, Taco Tuesdays. Now I even put myself in this ball pit. I always, not anymore because I've restructured, but my old structure, we used to have Thirsty Thursdays. So every 2 weeks we go to the pub, and I let everybody else decide what we're going to talk about. They chose. I was made sure that I was not the person leading or voicing whatever the narrative of that day is. And then the other Thursday was about going through our project management boards and doing some training or learning or something business related, which I did lead. So it was almost like we did this tag team against each other. So that's just a few examples. But how important are they? You just alluded to it's all right to have a nice business, but is there any value behind them?
Yes. You won't even get it depends. Yes, of course there is. We are people, we're emotional animals, and there is a balance. There's a famous quote that Peter Drucker of, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture on its own is a commune. difficult if you're just caring about creating a lovely environment where every day is Thirsty Thursday or Pizza Friday. Then that's going to be lovely for the people. I love pizza. You know, look at the shape of me. I'm not saying stop pizzas at all. If you have just strategy, which is about get to the top of the mountain, then it's a slog. It's not necessarily enjoyable because it's so outcome focused that you lose sight that actually it could be a lovely journey. And at the end of this mountain climb, I don't want to climb another mountain. You need both. Culture is almost a lubricant to your strategy, and strategy gives your culture direction. They're not opposing forces, they're two sides of the same coin. So it's not about taking away perks and goodies from your employees at all. It's about, can you be more clever and more intentional about how you use them? And often we find that things that we try in good faith actually help. Thirsty Thursdays might be really good because in marketing you need both the hold to account, strategic, all the Porter's Five Forces type stuff on one side, but you also need people to have space to be creative and come up with innovative ways of working. So you might have inadvertently found out that one set of meetings that are structured and pragmatic and organised suits one aspect of your success, and people being able to let their hair down and ideate in a different environment might actually support. My challenge and my question to business owners is that lucky? Or did you think about your people strategy and do it on purpose? That's the difference, is do you put as much thought into how do you create the environment intentionally rather than let's try this, let's try that and see what sticks, because that can be an expensive gig.
Well, I'm not trying to big myself up or anything, but that was an intentional. That Thursday drinks of me not leading anything, that wasn't an intentional thing I wanted to do for exactly the purpose that you figured out, that it was there for them to ideate or just ruminate about anything. And I'd say a good 75-80% of those conversations, it was always about work. And I didn't lead any of that, and I just sat there and just been like, wow, you guys love this, you love that, like bouncing around the ideas and things. And then over a couple of drinks those ideas get bigger and bigger and we can chop through them. People
are more comfortable. You've taken them out of the work context, so they're in a different you've had a kind of pattern interruption, as we call it. It's a really good approach. I'm really pleased it was done intentionally.
Thank you.
I'd be just as pleased if it was accidental, but how many other ways might you have tried before you found that way of working that actually, I wish we'd done this 6 months ago?
Yeah. I'm going to say I probably did a whole bunch of hundreds of other initiatives and ideas before then.
Yeah.
I just can't remember them anymore, I'm not going to lie. Because you go through so many different ideas all the time and trying to think, like, it's going to be the best for everybody and just trying to get that balance all the time. I'm sure there was hundreds and I probably failed at a whole bunch of them. I just can't even remember them anymore. I just tried to remember the good stuff these days. So I love that you said that the culture and strategy all aligning together along that business goal and vision. So when then you're looking at the teams individually, let's say a bigger organization here now, let's get a bit bigger, 100, maybe a few big, so you've got very clear defined HR, sales team, marketing team, doing the normal org. And one thing that you just said there that was really interesting was me in the marketing seat, innovation and ideas and creativity is very essential as a part of our job and a part of our process. And then, but would you take those differences in each of the different departments and look to creating a sort of a silo mini cultures in that organization? Is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea?
So it depends. The kind of elephant in the room is you're going to get cultures and subcultures happen. They happen. It's not, culture is not something that McKinsey drew up in the 80s and suddenly we all use. Culture is a social phenomenon that happens whenever you get three people together, and it subtly informs our behaviors, our decision making, our risk appetite. So the way that you speak, the language you use when you're with your family will be different to how you are at work, will be different to when you're with your friends, even though you're being yourself at the time. So let's not get hung up too much on a subculture is good or bad, or should we have one homogenous culture across a big organization? What we're saying is, what are the behaviors that you need for your team, your department, your function, or your organization to be successful? And then how do you encourage the processes and protocols and approaches that help that? So if you've got a part of your organization that requires that their output requires ideation, then what are the processes, etc.? What protocols do you have in place to encourage that? How many Thirsty Thursdays do you have? It's no good having ideas if you can't get them done. So you might have another department that's more about implementation, that might be more towards that pragmatism, practical, structured, high conscientious approach, in which case, what do you do to attract people that are naturally more comfortable operating in that space? And it might be things like, actually, the way that we do our one-to-ones and our mentoring sessions are completely different. Because in one channel, you need a bit more of a freewheeling conversation that then has an output. Whereas in the other, it might be, this is what we're here for, and this is the structure we're going to follow to help us achieve that. So it's subtle differences, not you have to be crazy to work here, and you don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps. It's what's the behaviors, just giving it some thought of what's the behaviors that are going to help you be successful. And this is the challenge. Most companies don't do that. They start with how do we make a great place to work?
Well, these are the two burning questions I have is, as a leader, I've found when you're the one kind of guiding the ship. Don't do correct me, this is just my thoughts.
No.
I'd be one guiding the ship on what is that culture, what is this kind of standards that we hold ourselves to. And in anything, when you're trying to communicate something to other people, you have to say it 5, 7, 10, 15, 20 times. You have to be so repetitive and consistent with that messaging. It's kind of law of marketing, but it's the law of communication with people. How does that mechanism work when you do need slightly different behaviors from different types of people in that homogenous?
It's interesting that you say, if I'm the leader of a ship, then I have to steer it. And actually, if you go onto a naval ship, the captain is not the one that is steering the ship, or stoking the engines, or rowing, or anything else. That's not what the leader does. But that's often, particularly in when we're under pressure, that's what we think we have to do. We have to lead from the front. I'll answer your question with another question.
Yep.
Who decides, which leader decides what content is acceptable and accurate on Wikipedia?
Also because it's the decentralized approach to building Wikipedia.
So Jimmy Whale, who's the leader, doesn't do that. He doesn't check every piece of content. He doesn't communicate to the thousands of volunteers, this is what we do. What's happened is he's set this is why Wikipedia exists. We want to become the most accessible, most accurate, open source piece of information on the interwebs. That everybody that is then attracted to be volunteer for Wikipedia then comes on with that mindset of, this is why we're here. This is a purpose I can get behind. And yes, there can be inaccuracies, and people can edit pages and make jokes about, LeBron James has just owned, he's the father of Jason Tatum and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it very quickly self-polices that behaviour and that output is not acceptable here, and it's corrected. So it becomes a self-policing state almost, because this is why we're here, and the behaviours that help us get there. If you show ones that are incongruent, then you won't be allowed. And sometimes my view of leadership is that sometimes leaders don't lead people. Leaders lead environments. It's like being a gardener. Gardeners do not grow fruit. Gardeners create the environment where the plants can do what they do best and grow the fruit themselves. Okay? And the more the leader goes down and starts playing about with the individual plants, actually the worse the fruit is. And sometimes we have to get out of our own way and just be a gardener. Create the environment where people can be themselves and contribute towards something purposefully.
And that is Richard Branson's famous quote, where he has the idea of like, this is the business, this is what we want to create, this is literally the one-liner. I want to make $1 billion airline. When originally he was just music records. And his one advice to any other entrepreneur is go and hire the best person you can possibly find for that individual seat, and then get out of their way.
Yes. And the example of Branson is a great example in psychology of how you need opposites. If you've got someone who's very conceptual, big picture, lots of ideas, what we call low conscientiousness, they can apply learnings from elsewhere. That's fantastic when you're coming up with the ideas, but actually holding people to account, being structured, making it a practical reality is not a strength. It doesn't mean they can't do it, it just takes more mental load, and it's not their best. They're an amazing goalkeeper and you're asking them to take penalties. No. Get somebody who's fantastic at taking penalties, and then don't give them development areas on improving their goalkeeping. We don't want more of us. We want the environment that allows you to play your position.
Exactly.
Know your position and play your position, and have the psychological safety and the permission to do so.
So because it's all sometimes great when we've got all of this knowledge in our heads and we kind of know what we want to do. It doesn't always translate.
Yes.
And so then when we're in the thick of the business, the day-to-day, what are like 3 easy symptoms to see in the business for us to think, okay, how can we be creating a better environment that aids great work to be done?
Another fabulous question. I don't know if you're just picking these out of the air, but they're superb, Charlie. So the first thing is, there is a reason that every single leadership book ever published always has a chapter on self-awareness. So knowing when are you at your best as a leader or as a business owner, as a manager, or just as an individual or as a follower, when are you at your best? What are your kind of blind spots and Achilles heels? You can work on them, but they will take more mental load. They'll take more cognitive effort. And they're also likely, if you're having to work in a way that is more energy expensive, you're more likely to stress and overextend as well. So where do you go when you're stressed? So for example, I have 2 stress points. I get to what we call acquiesce. So I've tried to convince you with logic. I've tried to convince you with passion and enthusiasm. You're just not getting it. I'm going to sit back and watch and be a passenger. So when I feel myself having a physiological response to stress and feel myself detaching, how do I catch myself and get back to kind of composure? Similarly, I also become a fantasist because I'm very big on ideas and conceptual and imaginative type stuff. But the result is I can have situations like, for example, a couple of weeks ago, a light came on in my car to say that I'd got a problem with my engine. It wasn't. It was a bit of dirt on the dust. But the very first thing that went through my head was, let's get a new car. And then I'll rationalize it away of, I've had this car for 4 or 5 years. It's probably worth changing. I can probably put it through the business and get the tax breaks. So I've rationalized away what is a completely unrealistic fantasist idea because I was stressed just in a second, because a light turned on. So do we have the awareness of when we're at our best, what our blind spots are, and where do we go when we're slightly stressed, we're slightly tired, we're caught unawares? So that's the first one. The second is then assume positive intent of everybody else. Nobody comes to work, nobody goes through life wanting to be bad. Okay, it's very, very, very rare. So when bad things happen, if we assume positive intent, then it makes us, rather than challenge the behavior we see, it makes us question, why did that behavior happen? If somebody is avoiding having a conversation with somebody, or if somebody lashes out verbally, or somebody cuts me up when I'm driving, do I think that's an idiot because they don't behave like me? Do I chase them down and cut them back up because I'm a passive-aggressive kind of person? Or do I take a second, just think, something must make them think that was okay? Is there something else going on in their life? Have they got a learned experience and that's how they survived it last time? But assuming positive intent changes your entire outlook on, I've employed this person that's not quite right, or I've been cut up by this person that's a bit of a fool. And the third one would be blend the two together. I'm at my worst when an engine light came on and I suddenly go, let's sell the car. In the meantime, my business partner, who's very structured and evidence-driven, and she keeps me grounded, is going, are you crazy? We can't do that. This is what's going through the box. So I stress her out with my response. She stresses me out. So it becomes a vicious cycle. If you don't have the culture in the relationship that allows you to go, actually, I need you to help bring me back to my kind of normal state and recognize the benefit that diversity brings, and you're kind of missing all the good stuff in life, never mind business.
I was just about to say, those are two incredible tips for just life. Never mind business.
Know thyself. Know thyself. Assume everybody's decent, and then let's live together.
Yeah,
that's it.
Exactly.
I sound like John Lennon.
But it does. It saves. As you're speaking, I've got just so many scenarios that are going through my head. Even I'll give you an example as well, because everybody will relate to this one. Receiving a Slack or a Teams message that could be phrased in a certain way that instantly sends stress response through the roof. I won't say any names or any like examples or anything, but I'm sure
Steve, wasn't it? So that's Steve. You've been.
But you receive a message, you go straight into stress mode, which takes you into fight or flight mode. And I will say, I'll tend to go into, if it's work, I'll go into fight mode. I'm just like, how can I combat this? And then as soon as you're in combative mode, it's then you against them. You know, you're just competing against each other. And if your environment is of a collaborative nature, well, that's just then butting heads, kryptonite, toxic. You know, and you do. And that's really, and people might think, oh, that's only a Slack message. Yeah, but if you compound the amount of Slack messages you might get on a day, 7 days a week, over 30 days, over a year, that will all compound together for that relationship of key people in your organizations. When actually, I could have it's actually happened to me yesterday, this is why it's so fresh. I could have looked at that message and gone, I actually did this actually. What was the intent of that person's message? What is it they're trying to achieve from that message? And then why are they asking me about it? So why is this behaviour of them coming to me for it? And to allude a little bit more, contextualise it, I obviously run a lot of advertising spend. Business is finite. If money is going out the door, what the hell's coming in the door? You know? And if there's no visibility by certain team members, whether they should be involved or not should be involved, that means that I need to work out, okay, how can then I actually how can I put things in place that's going to maybe stop those messages that get high stress responses to me, because there is something missing from their part that I could actually facilitate quite easily. Turns out they're just a day early, and I'm going to do a presentation on Monday anyway, and I was only 2 steps ahead of them, but it just required a quick message. You know?
Just ask. And there's probably 2 bits. One is read the message in different voices, because it decontextualizes it. So read it in Mickey Mouse's voice, read it in a family member's voice, just read it in silly voices, because it takes away it can feel quite visceral when we go to stress state. And that's because the second point, that you don't have part of your brain that says this bit deals with Slack stress, and this bit deals with relationship stress, and this bit deals with my coffee's not hot enough stress.
Yeah, we haven't evolved that much.
No, there's no redundancy in the brain. So everything is either safe or a mortal threat. That's it. So when you get that Slack message, what's actually happening is your brain goes, this is a threat to me. It's a threat to my status in the tribe. Which might mean I don't find a mate, is what your brain does, or I'm going to be ostracized from the tribe because I don't I don't fit in. So you naturally go into one of your 4 states. So fight sounds like quite a natural one for you.
Yep.
Flight. So I'm going to run away from the situation completely. So I'll go and find help somewhere else.
Yep.
Freeze. I'll deal with that later. I haven't got the bandwidth. I'll just detach. Or fawn, which is I'll go and try and please them, and I know I've upset my missus, but I'll do the washing up, babe. It's all right. Let me pick that up for you. I bought you some flowers. Okay. The risk there is your response might stress them further. They're just brown nosing, just sniffing around. Or in the argument,
that's my reaction. I'm just like, don't.
Yeah. Well, they're seeking conflict, so I'm not stepping down, so the conflict gets escalated. Yeah.
Exactly. It's always the little things. That's what I say. It's always the boring little things.
Make a big deal of the little things before the little things become a big deal. That's the cliche.
Exactly. Yeah. I promise that we make sure we talk about your research, because you have just unveiled it. We haven't got a huge amount of time left, but please tell us a little bit more about your research that you've been doing.
So earlier on, we spoke about kind of the history of leadership, and it's always been a person. And a leader has always set the direction and the kind of rules of engagement, the culture. My question was, if the people in a group know why they're there, what they're there to achieve, and they understand the rules of engagement, then do you need the leader? Can the environment, can the culture actually inform how we behave and how we deliver and how we manage risk and decisions? In the natural world, this happens quite a lot. If there was a natural disaster, is an example that I use, then the purpose becomes paramount. We need to save lives. And the rules of engagement will subtly inform things like, you're young and fit, you're out there moving boulders and trying to find survivors. You've got a great network, so you're on your phone trying to get FEMA or emergency services down to the site. I'm medically trained, so maybe I'm out treating survivors and trying to save people. Nobody told us to do any of that. We self-organised, playing to our own individual strengths. I'm not moving rubble, I'm not fit enough, but I can contribute in this way with medical stuff. So there's lots of examples in kind of nature and real life where this happens. And it also happens in things like sports, where if you take a football or a soccer game, given that you're in New York, before the match, there's vertical leadership. So somebody's in charge, and these are our tactics, and this is who's on the squad, and this is what we're going to play, and this is how we react if the team do X, Y, and Z. After the game, the same thing happens. There's a kind of mission debrief, who played well, who got man of the match, all that kind of stuff. But during the match, even though we say there's a leader, we say there's a captain on the court or on the pitch, actually we trust that the goalkeeper is going to be a goalkeeper and the left winger is going to play on the left wing. You know what to do, you've got the skills and competency, and the team around you trust that you're going to do your job so I can do what I'm great at. And we don't ask people to play out of position. We never ask the left back to go and play up front.
Oh, I don't know if you know, but David Beckham, obviously he switched from the right side to the left side, or the left side to the right side, I can't remember which now. Yeah. When he went from United to Milan, and there was uproar. Because it disrupted the organisation.
we do that all the time. We have a member of staff that leaves, so we've got to replace Dave. So we take Dave's job description and put it back online and try to fill a Dave-shaped hole, rather than what are we trying to achieve and what are the skills and attributes and experiences and cognition, all that sort of stuff that we need to fill that Dave-shaped hole, because maybe it isn't a Dave-shaped hole.
No,
Don't make Beckham play on the left when he's better on the right. You're doing a disservice to the team and to the individual, and he's expensive to recruit, and he's going to leave your organisation, and you're going to have a David-shaped hole to fill.
And that's what he did. He went all the way to LAX because he was just like, I'm bored here. Like, I'm totally underutilized, and that's what happened to him.
I may as well be bored somewhere else and get paid more.
That was exactly. If anybody's watched the Beckham documentary, that is exactly what he did.
I've not seen it, but we're quite predictable.
They're quite predictable, exactly. And I love that. So let me just summarize. If you give enough purpose behind a business, and obviously everybody is in their seat and given themselves the right accountability and room to be able to do the best of their ability, the leadership becomes less of that influence on how well that business is going to go.
The leadership is the gardener. The plants will do what they do. The apple tree is never asked to grow a pear. But if you create the environment, then maybe the pear tree will do what it's supposed to do and the apple tree will do it. It's a useful metaphor. And even if you don't use leaderless leadership, constellation leadership, it's still great practice to know where you're going.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think that's a great place to end today's show. I think that's a really great thing to just ruminate on, reflect on, and just have a look. Everybody just be looking at their own businesses and seeing how can they be taking any of these tips from today and put it into their business. Now, Danny, where can people go and find you and get in touch with you if they want to go obviously speak to you and benefit from your incredible services?
Oh, bless you. Thank you. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn because that's where all the cool kids hang out, apparently. And you can find me at dannywareham.com or at firgun.co.uk, which is my consultancy, FIRGUN, Firgun.
Perfect. We'll make sure it's always on the links, and obviously everybody gets to see many of these, gets to rewatch this episode as many times as they want. Thank you so much for your time today, Danny. It's been a pleasure. I can always talk about this stuff forever. So thank you for you. It's
been fantastic. Thank you for gifting some time and listen to my waffle for a little while. It's been a pleasure, Charlie.
Speak to you soon.